Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kingscrowd Podcast. I'm your host, Brian, joined by my two colleagues from Kingscrowd, Leah and Teddy. Today, we're going to be doing a deal review on Lumida Wealth. But before we get into that, wanted to say happy 4th of July, upcoming 4th of July to everyone, depending on when you're watching this. It's a little bit of a short week for many of us in the office. Now, because we're doing this podcast recording on the week of the 4th of July, thought it would be nice to share a little anecdote actually about the first crowdfunding project that really happened in America. Now, you may think, okay, well, we could go back to GoFundMe, Kickstarter days. Maybe you're thinking 1997, which I think was one of the first real official kind of recordings of a crowdfunding round where it was basically a band or an artist kind of like crowdfunding their tour. But no, we're going to go back to 1885. So we're going way back in history here. Now, at that point in time, the Statue of Liberty was basically in pieces in New York City. And it turns out that they needed to raise $250,000 for the pedestal that it was going to be put on. But the city wasn't able to come up with the money. They had hired some people to try and help them fundraise who weren't able to come up with the money. I actually didn't know this until I read about it, but it sounds like Philadelphia, Boston, all these other cities were actually like, hey, we'll pay for it. Just move it to our city. So kind of on their last straws of figuring out how they were going to get this funded so they could actually build and put up the Statue of Liberty, Joseph Pulitzer, who some of you may recognize from the name, had a newspaper at the time, The World, and he started a crowdfunding campaign for the actual pedestal that the Statue of Liberty was going to be sitting on. So at the time, they basically raised from more than 160,000 donors. They raised over $100,000, which if you adjust it for kind of today's dollars, $1 then was would be about $34 now. So, we're talking millions of dollars, but basically a lot of these donors gave on average about $1, and they were able to fund enough money to build the pedestal to put the Statue of Liberty on. I just think that's, going back to the roots of just what we're doing here in terms of innovation and making things happen and showing that when we all kind of put our money and our ideas and thoughts and energy together, we can do things that otherwise wouldn't be possible, even not being funded by, the New York City, kind of department themselves or anyone else. So Leah, Teddy, any quick takeaways based on that little anecdote before we jump into it for the day?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that the statue itself in France was some sort of crowdfunding. So the sculptor, Auguste Bertholli, initially was envisioning the statue as a gift from France to the United States in order to commemorate how France helped in the independence war. He first tried to finance it, and it failed, actually. At that time, Napoleon III was in the middle of France and Napoleon II were in the middle of a war in Europe. And apparently the United States was not really cheating in that war, which, they helped plenty enough. I have nothing to complain about that in history. But at that time, French people were just not that excited about doing a sculpture for the United States. So he tried again a second time, and he was a little bit more inventive at this point. So in order to raise from the crowd, he had the help from wealthier people and from journals, from the press as well. And one of the first things that he did, he invited everybody to actually come and see the statue being built into his shop. And that made people want to participate. And want to chime in, and that's how he started raising the money. He also exposed the head and the arms of the statue at Paris 1973 Universal Exposition, which also made people even more excited about it. And finally, and that's really, I think, probably one of the first try at reward crowdfunding, he was thanking people who were donating by giving them postcards or images of the statue, which helped him collect even more money. And while it was a little bit difficult in the United States to raise money for the pedestal, that second time, it was very easy for Bertolli to fund the statue. And French people were very excited, very happy to give that great gift to the United States.
Well, that's so cool. It's such a good story. And yeah, 250 years, just the spirit of entrepreneurship and, making things happen and just being able to seeing the evolution, right, of kind of everything that I'm sure there was even lots more examples of this back then that were happening that just weren't recorded. We didn't have social media and other things to kind of document everything that was going on. But I want to tie this in actually to, somewhat of what's happening in the markets today. So get a little history lesson here, which is nice. But in addition, as you know, we cover the online private markets every week, and that since we are in July now, the first half of 2026 is now done, and we've launched a big update to our online private markets market intelligence page. So if you go to data and market trends on the kingscrowd.com website, you can now see at a snapshot a bunch of new market data that's right at your fingertips. One of the first big changes we actually did is that previously the markets page that we were only showing equity crowdfunding deals. We want to represent the entire market. So we also added debt and revenue share, and you can look at the market as a whole. So if you click on any of these filters, it will update all of the charts for how much capital is being raised each month, how many raises are live, whether you're looking at equity, debt, or all of them combined. In addition, we can take, for example, a 5-year view, and you can see trends over time. So this is something that we've had before, but something else we've added to this page that just makes it much more interactive and able to drill deep into the data is, let's say we want to take a look at May 2023 in more detail. You can click on that month and you can see how much capital was raised, what the month over month and year over year changes were, the total valuations, the average per raise, what were the top platforms that month in terms of capital raising performance, even what were the top 3 raises. So you can really go into deep detail. And a little pro tip, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard and quickly go left and right so you can just see all the different months that are next to it. But in addition to that, there's quarterly views. So if you start, saying, hey, we're going to take a look at the 5-year data, let's look at the quarterly data, you can slice and dice it like that. And when you click on that, it's going to drill down to the monthly again. And down in the platform chart, I'll just show that. We also show all of the different platforms over time in their market share. So you can toggle between 2 different views. There's the market share. So this shows it as a percent of 100%. You can see a lot of the blue lines here. Obviously, platforms like WeFunder, Start Engine, Republic back in the earlier days. You see a lot of orange showing up here kind of around that 2022, 2023 timeframe. That's Dealmaker. So you can see a lot of interesting trends. And if we take a look, over just the most recent month of June, Equifund accounted for 33% of the capital raise. So they had $9 million, some really big raises on Equifund the current month for June. So take a look at the new markets page. We put this out there because we want to put all of the data and analytics that Kingscrowd offers at your fingertips. So whether you're an investor trying to make more informed investment decisions, looking at trends and valuations, you can dig into that. Or if you're a founder who's raising capital, come here, you can dig into the industry. There's additional filters. So if you click on the more filters bar, you can look at different platforms, securities, states, sectors, or industries. So just adding a lot of new functionality here. In addition, if you want to look at Regulation A, there's a Reg A toggle as well, and it just updates all those same charts for Reg A. So wanted to share that, but as we go into this week and the 4th of the holiday, again, happy 4th to everyone. We want to give you a deal review this week. So this week we're going to be taking a look at Lumida Wealth. I'm going to be handing things over to Teddy to introduce the deal, and we'll get into it. So Teddy, take it away.
So yes, the company we're going to be looking at today, Lumida Wealth. We are currently diligencing them for our VC fund, the Kingscrowd Outperform Fund. And so basically, yeah, Lumida is a SEC registered investment advisor. They have a team of financial advisors providing that traditional wealth management service. But the real pitch around their raise page, as you can see here, is that they're building an AI native, kind of what they're calling a wealth architect, which basically the vision being that architect will basically replace a majority of financial advisors. So the end game is really a sort of AI avatar that will actually manage clients' wealth. So taking a client's goals and working backwards to build, monitor, and really kind of service a full financial plan, make decisions on clients' behalf, handle K-1 collection, tax impact estimation, estate planning, retirement plans, all those things that a traditional wealth manager does for clients today. In the sort of traditional sense, they believe long term is going to be fully replaced natively and autonomously with AI. But taking a step back, so there's really, as mentioned, two businesses under this roof. There's that first profitable advisor-led wealth management business expected to hit about 9 million to 10 million of revenue this year. And, so that's kind of the legacy cash generating business that's really kind of funding this AI architect build out side of the house. And secondly, what's currently on the market today in this kind of long-term goal of being an AI wealth manager, they have what's called the Lumida Invest super app. So that's really kind of version one of that long-term wealth architect play. And just to be clear about like so that app is available on the App Store today, but today it's really just informational and analytical. So it doesn't execute trades, doesn't manage money quite yet. That's kind of still on that human advisor-led side of the business. The app itself today, the kind of the key functionalities of it are you can get a bull versus bear case analysis on essentially any asset, real-time portfolio aware news feed. So, if you own Nvidia and they report earnings, the app will kind of surface what happened and what it means for your specific portfolio, depending on your allocations. There's watch list intelligence, flags entry points, so you don't kind of miss a name you were tracking and wanted to get in onto once the price hit a certain amount. Strategy and theme following, so you can follow Berkshire or kind of some hedge funds to like Two Sigma, things like that, or you can follow themes, so like data centers, clean energy, biotech. You can kind of get kind of curated feeds depending on your interests and themes that you want to follow. And then lastly, kind of you can get a sort of AI point of view or an AI analysis on any ticker, but it will factor in your own portfolio's concentration and risk and kind of walk you through kind of what entering a certain position in the stock market, how will it affect your overall risk of your portfolio, your over concentration, things like that. So in talking to the founder and kind of digging more into this company, the app itself, it's not really that sort of ask an AI bot experience. It's very sort of highly prescriptive, I would say, kind of fine-tuned on top of the frontier models, of course, like any application layer AI company today. And they also have an institutional grade factor model, basically a risk factor model that they rent out from a company called Wolf Analytics. So that's the same sort of risk model used by some large hedge funds. So that's sort of what feeds into the risk analysis and kind of giving users recommendations and concentration risks of their portfolio and things like that. Anyway, in terms of trading functionality, that is sort of the next step for Lumina Wealth in this app and kind of being able to let users of the app actually execute trades. Kind of today, the app, if it provides some insight that you want to take action on, you have to move over to another app, which is obviously a bottleneck they want to solve for, which they will be doing later this year. And but yeah, just to be clear, this app today it's really sort of version one. It doesn't have any of those autonomous capabilities that long term they want to eventually have built out. But I think it kind of opens up an interesting broader discussion of AI disruption in wealth management. We sort of seen every decade or two, there's a sort of new form factor. There was discount brokerage that gave us like the Dean Witters of the world. The internet gave us E-Trade. Mobile, when kind of trading became mobile, we had Robinhood and some others there. And this next wave of trading and wealth management, it does seem like it's gonna be AI will have a very large place there. It's when you look at traditional wealth management, I think the sort of question is how much the newer does the newer generation really care about having like the human-led wealth management experience and whether they want to really kind of just pass that all over to AI. I think it'll probably end up being a little bit of both, where like people will want AI to do a lot of this, but they still want that sort of human touch to kind of help with the edge cases or just to kind of look everything over and things like that. So anyway, wanted to hand it over to Brian and Leigh on kind of what you think about AI disruption in this area and kind of what you think about Lumina Wealth. I think we both made that mistake, Brian. I think at the beginning you called it Lumina Health.
Did I say Lumina Health? Lumina Wealth.
And I just did it too.
Real quick, and I want to hear about Leia too, but just for clarification, Teddy, because I was taking a look at the financials on the Kingscrowd page. So you could just maybe dig in real quick the current business versus the app. Like, do they have any paying customers or traction with the app? Or you mentioned like they haven't added the trade execution yet. So is it kind of this pivot of this business that's really evolving from a more traditional kind of wealth advisory to something that's I don't know if it's a SaaS subscription, right, or an app based on the trade execution.
Yeah, so right now it is all of their revenue is from the legacy wealth management side of the business. This company isn't super old, so they sort of founded the company, I think 5 years ago or earlier or sooner, kind of with the overarching mission, like from the beginning of, okay, we eventually want to have an AI-led wealth management platform that will sort of give that AI experience to future clients. So yeah, it's not really, I would say, a pivot. They always wanted and we're always kind of building this in the background. It was sort of just having that traditional wealth management arm they're always gonna need that because there will always be clients that will want the human touch to it, and there or like sort of edge cases where you need a professional advisor to actually advise you on what to do with certain tax strategies or um, just like the whole number of different things that you would want a actual human to look at. So on the app itself, they will have those, of course, have like the SaaS subscription fees for the more like premium features that they'll eventually sort of roll out into the app itself and to help and kind of when you get into a little bit more complicated things like when you're looking at tax or kind of retirement type of functionalities of an app like that, those would be kind of more premium features that they would charge for. But today, all the revenue is from the advisor kind of legacy side.
So talking about revenue, we have about 3 million in revenue in 2025 from the notes you shared with us earlier. 75 million valuation. So we have a 25x. And I feel like 25x is something that is definitely high. In some cases, will be kind of digestible. Let's say the company is growing super quickly or it has strong defensibility. It's something you can think, all right, it's high, but the upside is definitely there. In this case study, um, knowing that the app is not ready yet and that they are, competitors in the space, and that actually for investors moving maybe from one platform to another can be costly in terms of time, energy, complexity, etc. Do you think this is a valuation that is justified? Do you think this is a deal breaker for investors? Do you think, we should still consider the company? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean the valuation as we see with companies kind of with ambitious long-term plans, especially around AI, they tend to like bake that future growth into the valuation. If this was just, a wealth management company, this valuation would be like a non-starter, I would say. The app is out. I've used the app. It's actually quite good. I enjoy using it. It's not really, I don't do a ton of like trading where I would need to like, I don't do a lot in like the public markets, so I'm not like probably necessarily their intended user in terms of the app today. Once it sort of moves into the more autonomous wealth management features, I think I'd probably be more interested in it. Um, but I think this valuation like isn't super surprising, like given their 2026 estimates of 9 to 10 million. So then it'll be more of like the 7.5x, which I think is very fair. In terms of whether we should consider it for the fund or like continue considering it, given sort of some of the concerns we have, I think the biggest question I'm sort of still grappling with is if AI and wealth management is this inevitable and this big of an opportunity, like what stops the Robinhoods and the Schwabs of the world from shipping AI products? We already see Robinhood already does this with their Cortex functionality that is sort of that AI bot type experience. And they have like these huge network effects of all these, I think they have like 300 billion or something, probably more of AUM there. It's a really tough space just given what the competitive landscape looks like and the network effects and network advantage that they have to help inform their models that they're developing to help to give the best possible output for their users. Like Robinhood, I think just has like a huge advantage there. as do a lot of the other legacy platforms. Yeah, I think that's sort of the question we've all sort of had in the back of our minds and when evaluating a company like this that competes in such a competitive space.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think one of the first things that stood out in the ratings, and it was kind of one of the things in my mind I first went to, is what are their differentiators? Okay, they're going to use AI. I agree, that's a direction a lot of these wealth management platforms are going to be moving, because as someone who's kind of on the earlier side of the millennial generation myself, I find it's easier to ask questions sometimes, to your AI friend, who you don't feel stupid if you're going to ask a question, versus if you have a really fancy wealth advisor, you might be a little bit more hesitant just about, I don't want them to think I'm stupid by me asking this question. So you might be more willing to share and be more honest with something like this. So I think that's the direction it's going. Yes, there are always going to be people who it's built on those relationships as well. But to your point, it's, Robinhood, but also, as we mentioned here, Betterment and all of these robo-advising platforms, the whole fintech industry, the whole wealth management advising industry sees what AI can do. So it's really like, what is going to be their long-term competitive advantage? And they talk about their community and some of the other things that they kind of talk about throughout their pitch deck, but it's going to be a huge industry. But are they going to be one of the ones that are really going to be able to capitalize on it is kind of a question.
AI is not really a differentiator anymore. It's like table stakes. It's like if you don't have AI implemented in your software offering, it's like
what software was back in the day. It's not just, oh, hey, we're using the internet, we're using software. It's if you're not using it, you're not even going to exist. So it's table stakes, like you said.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I think that's we're still sort of in diligence here and asking questions to the founder. That's sort of still one of the pending questions is sort of like, what is the differentiation between you or Cortex from Robinhood or kind of some of the other AI native platforms we're seeing out there, that they certainly aren't that long. What the long-term vision is of having like a fully autonomous AI experience, managing your wealth and like doing a lot of these complicated things for you. No one's doing that, but in terms of like what the app is today and what it will be in the near term, like how do you really compete there?
What about the team? You've gone back and forth a little bit. I know you're still talking, but what are your vibes in terms of the founder and the team that are executing on this?
Yeah, so the CEO, he's sort of had a long Wall Street career. So he's like really solid, knowledgeable about the space, has the connections in the wealth management and in the finance industry in general. So definitely the sort of leader to run a company like this and has a prior exit. I forget what space it's in, but definitely a founder first kind of guy. And they're backed by a lot of interesting people. If you go to their raise page and go to their investor section, there's people that have been on the board of Circle, Coinbase, SoFi. There's quite a few kind of angel investors that are GPs at some large VC firms. There's a former SEC chairman. Yep, so you can see that. I think there's a lot of people that rightfully so buy into this vision of like this industry will be an AI enabled and AI first industry eventually. It's just like, how do we get there and how much of that will be pushed through by the incumbents today? That's sort of the question I think to be looking at here. But yeah, I mean, the CEO is super solid, and I think tells a very interesting story here. I think in doing your diligence, you really kind of the bet is really on the industry itself, and as we've been talking about, how much of that's going to be dominated by the incumbents.
July 5th, I think it's closing. So while you get a little bit of time sitting by the barbecue or hanging out for the 4th, maybe just pull up the page, take a look. But head over to Kingscrowd as well. Check out the Kingscrowd raise page and analysis. You can get all the ratings and the report, Teddy's report on Lumida Wealth. And other than that, thank you everyone for joining us. Have an amazing 4th. We will be back here again after the holiday. And check out, again, Kingscrowd. We have a free newsletter. If you're not already signed up, join newsletter.kingscrowd.com. It's awesome data-driven analysis that we send out each week. It has staff picks from the investment team here, as well as our data-driven chart of the week and other great content like the podcast episodes. All right, we'll see you all back here next time. Thanks.